I'm here with Daniel from Prerequisite Capital Management, and we're here to talk about wealth creation today. Everyone wants to create wealth and needs to create wealth, but there are some important questions that we have around this, and people being and having the ability and knowledge in how to do that in a sustainable and a manner that is compelling is something that I think is really important.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we're even touching on this, in this format, is one of the frequent conversations we have with people, especially I seem to have with people, is people looking at markets as a mechanism to build wealth through.
Right.
Now, some are more aggressive than others in terms of either trading or leverage trading or investing in all its different ways, shapes and forms, but essentially looking at markets to build wealth, right? And normally when we get people come to us like that, one of the first things I'll tend to sit them down and sort of suggest to them is that if they're looking to build wealth, to build their balance sheet, to make their millions, so to speak, and build an income, they really, in the first instance, probably shouldn't be looking at markets. Okay, they need to be looking at what it is they have to steward presently, which typically is either their career or their business or whatever it is.
The gifting.
Yes, and so the reason for that is that in every field, so in business, most people can appreciate that if you don't have a competitive advantage, you probably shouldn't compete in that business, because why should a customer choose your business versus the other competitor down the street or whatever? So if you don't have a competitive advantage, a unique and compelling and useful way of doing things that's differentiated from everyone else, maybe you shouldn't be in business, right? Because you have no positive expectation for returns or outside size profits or a growing revenue stream that comes from customers seeking you out versus everyone else. But the same applies in markets, right? If you don't have a competitive advantage in markets, you really shouldn't compete, right? It's exactly the same. But people seem to be more, aware of that sort of a principle in business and less aware in markets. And especially markets, and depending on how they are presented to you, can be quite seductive in that, that's easy, especially on a backwards looking basis. But on a forward looking basis, with all the other issues, it's actually, it's a field of endeavor, a calling in its own right.
That's right.
Right. So if you're intending that markets and investing will become your career, your primary focus, in which you will, evolve and develop competitive advantages, that's fine. Maybe markets will be, or investing will be, a pathway for you to create wealth. But if you don't want to make markets your primary focus and central focus, then you probably should be focusing on whatever your interests are, however you're wired, different personalities, whether it is through the lens of a career or a career path or a business. In some ways, if you're so wired, it can be easier with a business, because at least, if you create a revenue stream, if you do that as an employee, you get paid a salary and a wage or a commission, and that's it. You create that same revenue stream as a business owner, you get the salary or the wage and the dividend or whatever it is, but plus you have an asset that's building, because a multiple of that revenue stream will be the valuation of your business that is building.
That's right.
Right, so you're not just earning a salary and a wage, you're also earning, besides the salary and the wage or the dividend or however, you're also earning that uplift in the valuation that is accruing to that revenue stream that you've established, right? And so owning a business is typically one of the more powerful ways of building wealth over time. But ultimately, even owning a business is useless if you don't have that focus on competitive advantage, which is really about solving problems, like real world problems, in a unique, sustainable and differentiated way. When it comes to building wealth, normally we're redirecting away from, making money in markets. Your portfolio should be where you preserve the wealth that you've already made.
Yeah, that's a good statement. It shouldn't be the place where you roll the dice.
Unless you're a trained risk taker and you've made your career the markets or investing, then you have all the frameworks and the capacity to develop the insight and the awareness and the risk management to be able to do that, right? It's really hard, even if you do dedicate, decades to that pursuit, because it's full on. It's all or nothing. But that's the same in most fields.
Yeah, of course.
The only way to succeed at anything is to really just give it everything. But you need to do it intelligently with a laser-like focus towards competitive advantages, right? Yeah. You need to develop an edge in whatever field it is. If it's in a career, there's a myriad of different ways you might express this, but you want to be able to become unique in your field, solve a problem, or do it in a way that others don't, but in a way that is valued by your employer or by people in that field.
And this requires focus, doesn't it? And I think many people find themselves with, a multiplicity of
it's a classic young person's problem. I've done the same thing where, when you're younger, you tend to think you can do all of these different things at once and somehow succeed. But the reality is you really do need to drill down into a specific sort of mission and purpose, so to speak, to evolve the relationships you need, the competitive insights, the awareness, all of the different mechanisms that surround making something work. And trying to do that with a multitude of focuses is dangerous.
So if you were to drill down and say, hey, there are just some things that you should really be focusing on, not so much in terms of your gifting an area, but if there were some principles that underpin...
It's hard not to succeed if you're focused on a few key elements.
Yeah.
So basically trust and character.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll run through them quick and then I'll expand on what I actually mean by this stuff. Trust and character, competitive advantages and problem solving, passion, curiosity and humility, right? Very essential. And
relationships.
Relationships,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
The more people you know, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, most of what is business and even any given career is solving problems for people. So people have a problem, you have a solution or a way. That is your profession, that is your career, or that's what your business exists for. But the common denominator is still people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so maybe you'll get away with being a train wreck in terms of a relational train wreck with people, but if you want to increase the probabilities of succeeding and building wealth, you probably want to get better at relationships.
That's I make that statement to my kids all the time. I said the most important thing that you need to learn is actually how to relate to people, because it's what you're going to be doing with most of your life.
Yeah, well, that crosses over into problem solving and competitive advantages.
Absolutely.
Nearly all problems in life, I still haven't figured out whether it's 99% of all problems or 100% of all problems, but whatever it is, 99% of all problems in life ultimately are leadership problems, right? They exist or they are tolerated for a lack of leadership in a particular realm or situation or whatever. And so, learning how to lead, even in our business, it's prerequisite. Half of what we do is basically analysing the world, analysing markets, managing risk, making decisions. The other half of what we do is actually more of a leadership function. So we're helping people to understand what is going on, to basically growing confident and adapt with proper environments at the right time and all of this sort of thing. And so, an absence of leadership only leads to bad things. You can't produce anything. And then problem solving in its own right, there's ways to solve problems. Most people have never been trained in how to actually solve a problem, right? So most people will look at a problem or a series of undesirable issues in whatever the field is, whether it's a technical field or a social setting or whatever it is. They'll laser into one thing and they'll just go, oh, well, if we do this, we solve that. But typically, the way it actually works is that you might have 10 to 15 problems in front of you. But if you step back first and go, okay, what's really going on here, and start to distill back the core issues, there might only be one or two things that actually are the root causes of these 10 to 15 things.
So true.
So you step back first, try to distill down, and this is more of a systems way of problem solving and understanding the world. Because everything is a system, everything's interrelated and interdependent, whether you realize it or not. And so if we step back and take that sort of a lens, then you can get those key things. Instead of trying to chase your tail, solving or putting band-aids on 15 different symptoms that are just expressions of these core root issues, you can just go straight to the source, deal with that, these disappear. And so even problem solving, there's a whole world of principles that people probably don't necessarily appreciate.
Most people spend a lot of their time and energy trying to solve problems that are not dealing with the root causes.
Totally.
And so we talk about some of these key principles. Character and trust is absolutely a bedrock, is it not?
Yeah, so without trust, nothing grows. Now people, obviously what we do in studying economies and societies and economic systems and businesses, people often gloss over the fact that it's this underpinning, this bedrock of trust that actually facilitates all of that economic activity, business activity, transactions, savings, etc. I'm trusting that you will do what you say, and also you won't harm me or my property, or if we establish a contract, that you'll actually fulfill what is in that contract. And if you don't, that there's some other mechanism to enforce consequence. But that's kind of like that higher rule of law concept, the predictability, stability, fairness of a property rights, contract law regime. And so without that, there is no economic activity, right? Or it's really bad. I mean, most of our living standards are actually predicated on the fact that we have this interlocking system of trust, this institutionalized system of trust that we can lean upon and depend on and predict out into the future. In absence of that, everything deteriorates, but it's the same in marriage. If there's no trust, it's not going to head in the right direction.
No, that's right, yeah.
And so in every aspect of life, without trust, nothing actually grows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so how do we become more trustworthy? Well, it's usually in the little things.
Character.
Yes. Yes means yes, no means no. Your word is your bond, all of these old school things which go to underpinning trust. It's also big compromises start with small compromise. So compromise in the little things, before you know it, you're probably compromising in big things too. It's the same in assessing credit risk around a person or a company or a country or a government. We're coming back to issues of trust. Do I trust in, and often, you may as well go into it here, but trust is a very blunt word in the English language, right? There's so many different dimensions of trust, it's ridiculous. I trust your intent, but I don't trust your capability.
Yeah.
Right. Or I trust your ability, I just don't trust your intent. Or
So
both.
true.
I trust your intent and I trust your ability to deliver on whatever you're saying you can deliver on or whatever. And there's actually other categories as well. Like in the end, I realized you probably need about 5 or 6 or 7 English words for trust. But we just bluntly use this word trust. Oh, you don't trust me. Is it my intent, my capability, or is there some other mechanism? There's a whole variety of things.
Wow.
But if you become known, and it takes 20 years to build a reputation and, 5 minutes to blow it type thing, if you become known as someone who is trustworthy, diligent, reliable, how hard is it for you to become honest? Really? And so that's something you can control. And that actually can become a competitive advantage in its own right in many fields.
That's a great statement.
Right? And without trust, nothing grows. I mean, our business exists because we earn people's trust over time.
I mean, you even speak to tradies about this. The ability for one tradie to say, I will be there when I say I'm going to be there is actually a competitive advantage for them.
Yeah, that's right. And so, but that's the whole point. Competitive advantages come in many forms.
That's right.
And so you can be a nurse, right? In a public system hospital even. And sure, there's many things that you can't control, and there's many things where you're kind of forced by the broader system to operate in this way. But you can still develop other attributes that set you apart and differentiate yourself in a good way. And so guess who's going to be last to be fired if there's any issues, or first to be promoted, or first, who's going to get the favor to move into another, whatever it is they want, because they're, like, none of this is rocket science. The same applies in business, right? The same even applies in governments and nations. Who's going to attract the capital in the world? Which country? Well, that country which can be trusted, so the capital is going to be safe and can actually generate returns and be rewarded for putting you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's the same principles all over the place.
Apply inside of wealth creation as individuals. I guess, the second thing that you mentioned there was relationships, and you briefly touched on that, but can you take a moment to expand on that?
So we've already talked about how everything has to do with people anyway, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're solving problems, you're solving someone's problem to help make their life better or to provide some sort of service, hopefully. The real key to it is that it's easier just to actually care about people than to pretend that you care about people, because it's going to come through anyway. And if you actually authentically care about people, place value on them, then they will tend to place value on you. And so if you find ways to help them become more successful, guess what's going to happen? Eventually you're going to become more successful as well, because you're becoming valuable to people and indispensable to people.
Yeah, great.
If you can become indispensable to whoever it is you're serving, then job security, the whole works takes care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You still need to be wise, but this stuff is not rocket science. But this is all slow way's the sure way kind of thing.
You've talked a bit about problem solving and competitive advantage already. The one point that I think it'd be great to dig down into is passion, curiosity, and humility. You mentioned sort of bundle those three things together.
Yeah, you have those three things, you will just own whatever space you're in. Okay, the humility keeps you humbled, so you can actually learn and you can perceive opportunities and risks and problems and solutions where other people might not, because they're blinded by ego or agenda or whatever.
Little statements, so you can actually learn. Humility, so you can actually learn.
Pretty much.
So pride,
yes, is acidic to actually learning, actually evolving comprehensive core solutions to core problems, and evolving strategy, right? Building relationships, right? Pride is acidic to a relationship. That's not going to end well.
Curiosity,
well, yeah, that's another ingredient to learning. And see, most business and even careers exist because problems need to be solved. And so if you're curious, you'll always be looking for the real nature of a problem or other opportunities or other solutions that maybe others haven't really found because they're complacent. And then passion, if you're really interested and wired for what you do, you find meaning in the mission that you have in that space or in whatever it is you're doing, then, well, it's very easy to get out of bed every morning, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you not succeed?
Absolutely.
If you have these elements and you're geared towards developing competitive advantages, valuing people, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's kind of like, it's not rocket science.
Great. That's great. Obviously, these are some principles that you at Prerequisite Capital Management function by, in terms of investment and operating in that market space, this is your lane, and encouraging people in the area of passion and gifting that they are in to use these principles
all of these
and
things.
apply
Well, the funny
these
thing
in
is,
their lane.
Well, everything we've just talked about, even though we're talking about wealth building, guess what? If you're looking for an advisor or an investment manager, what do you think you need to look for in them?
Great statement. Yeah.
Right.
So
if you're
true.
looking for a business partner,
Yep.
what do you think you need to look for? If you're looking for a spouse, I mean, this applies to all these areas, and so it's the same set of things. And if you're expecting these things in others, you probably need to become this yourself. Right, and because you will attract...
Like attracts like.
Yeah, and if you want better quality friends, well, guess what? Be
a better friend.
Yeah, and so to the degree that you grow in these things and expand your capacity, your ability to steward things in your field of expertise, you're passionate, you're curious, you're humble, you're learning new things, figuring new things out. Before you know it, you're multiple steps ahead of your competition and your field.
Right.
You don't even need to worry about your competitors when you take this sort of approach to things. It's a bit of an over-extreme statement, but you get the idea, because you're
absolutely.
focused on making things better, solving proper problems, being pragmatic, making stuff happen, placing value on people, building relationships, expanding relationships. You know, like the more people you know, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
It's hard to really screw it up if that's what you're doing, you know, and you don't really need to worry about competitors. In fact, they'll be worried about you, because how do they keep up with that? I wouldn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're developing in your uniqueness anyway, in a very authentic way.
Yeah.
All they need to do is do the exact same thing.
In their field.
They'll be different, yeah, and you probably actually get on fantastically. I mean, they're not a competitor anymore. They're a friend, even though technically they're a separate business. But they've got a place and you've got a place.
Yeah, great.
And you'll probably even send customers to them and vice versa, because there's a unique solution for everyone.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, but it's all this, it's common sense.
Common sense principles that underpin a
everything.
life, ultimately, but are key to wealth creation. Thanks for your time, Dan. Appreciate that.